Hello, everyone. My name is Kopi, and I was born and raised in the small coastal town of Carmel by the Sea, California. My family struggled to make ends meet, so I was not able to attend college like many of my friends. After high school, I started working as a grocery store clerk to help support my family. Life was a little tough, but I didn't have many choices. I was 25 years old when I met and married my husband in early 2020. He was 3 years older than me and worked as an auto mechanic in a small garage in the city. He was a quiet, collected man who seemed trustworthy, which gave me hope that we could have a stable life together. My husband is Chinese American. My mother-in-law is American, but my father-in-law is Mexican. My husband's family is a unique blend of two different cultures. My mother-in-law, a typical American woman, is very open and friendly, always trying to maintain traditional American family values. She has a modern lifestyle and often participates in community activities, including yoga sessions and other social events. She is gentle and polite and always shows concern for me, at least on the surface. My father-in-law, on the other hand, carries the traditions and conservative thinking of an older generation of Chinese men. He is about 52 years old, a man who appears calm on the outside but is unpredictable on the inside. He worked in construction when he first came to the United States and later became a small manager in a machine shop. Although he is retired, he is still the spiritual leader of the family. After we got married, although our life was not rich or luxurious, I felt happy. We lived a simple life, working together and sharing the small joys of everyday life. I believed that as long as we were together, everything would be fine. But what I did not expect was that the mental and physical deficiencies would gradually undermine our initial happiness. To be honest, my husband, although he looks big and strong, is very weak in sex. This has become a big problem, but I don't know how to deal with it. He often has premature ejaculation, and every time it happens, I can't hide the disappointment that rises in my heart. I tried not to let it affect our relationship, but the repetition made our life more and more boring and empty, especially when, after more than a year of living together, we still don't have children. This put more and more pressure on my shoulders. My husband is the eldest son and the only son in his family. Besides him, the family also has a younger sister, but she is still in college, and her future of getting married and having children is still far away. So all the expectations and responsibilities of having children to continue the family line fell on us, and it became a burden that I couldn't escape. I was under a lot of pressure from both my husband's family and myself. I knew my husband was under pressure, but he never expressed it. Instead, he tried to escape by being quiet and working harder. As for me, I had to deal with my mother-in-law's silent questions and my father-in-law's close scrutiny every day. My husband's parents called us together one evening, sitting solemnly as if preparing for an important conversation. I could feel the tension in the air before they spoke, and my mother-in-law gently suggested that we visit the doctor to see if anything was wrong. I knew my husband's family expected more of me, but I didn't know how to handle the situation when he refused to face it. Gradually, we grew apart, and the marriage began to fall apart because of these little things that we never discussed out loud, but that changed everything. As my mother-in-law continued to explain that she just wanted to make sure that everything was okay and that no one had any serious problems, I sat in silence, looking at my hands, not surprised at all because I had been waiting for this conversation for a long time. I realized that our childlessness had become a major concern for her, and no matter how gentle she was, I still felt the pressure hanging over my head like a weight. Although she didn't say it out loud, I knew she was subtly doubting my fertility at the time, and I felt a strange sense of shame, as if it was all my fault. My husband had a different reaction. He sat up straight, his face tense, and immediately refused, stating that no tests were necessary. His tone was a bit harsh, and I could tell that he was trying to protect his pride by refusing to acknowledge that he might have a problem. Every time I brought it up, he dodged or dismissed it as unimportant. But the reality was that it had become a huge burden in our lives. The in-laws stared at him, and the atmosphere in the room slowly became suffocating. No one spoke, but the silence was heavy with unspoken disappointment. The expectation that a wife must bear a child to maintain the family line was on one side of me, and my husband's refusal to face reality left me unsure of what to do. As time went on, the atmosphere in the house became more tense at every meal. Whenever I saw my in-laws, I felt an invisible pressure pressing down on me. Their questions about my health and their words of encouragement were no longer caring, but rather like knives piercing deep into my fear that not having children had become a hidden wound. It grew worse with each passing day. One evening in September 2021, a day I still remember vividly, what happened next completely changed my life. My husband had a party at work and came home late. My mother-in-law had a yoga class with her friends as usual, so it was just me and my father-in-law at home. I never thought he could be a danger to me. At that time, I just thought of him as a family member, even though my relationship with him was never very close. After a long day at work, I took a shower and put on a short dress just to feel comfortable at home. I went into the kitchen and prepared dinner for the two of us. I didn't think much of it. It was just a normal meal between two family members. I distinctly remember going into the living room and seeing my father-in-law sitting on the chair, looking at me a little strangely. But I didn't pay much attention at that time. I called him in for dinner as usual, and he got up and walked slowly into the kitchen. Everything seemed normal at first, but there was an uneasy feeling that I couldn't explain. After dinner, I stood and washed the dishes. The kitchen was quiet except for the sound of running water, and I was concentrating on my work, not realizing that something was about to happen. Suddenly, I felt a pair of arms wrap around my waist and hold me tightly from behind. I was startled, turned around in panic, and saw that the man was none other than my father-in-law. At that moment, I didn't know how to react. My mind was in turmoil, unable to believe that this was actually happening. I wanted to scream, to push him away, but he covered my mouth. I couldn't escape, and all my pleas seemed to go unspoken. He held me tightly, and while I was still in shock, he whispered in my ear that he would help me get pregnant. His words made me feel disgusted, but I was powerless to stop him. Before I could react, everything happened quickly and violently, and I had no time to resist. The terrible feeling at that time made me collapse, holding my head and sobbing, the feelings of shame, disgust, and fear almost suffocating me. However, my father-in-law, with a calm and cold expression, simply said that he did it for the happiness of the family. He got up and left as if nothing had happened, leaving me in chaos and despair. That night, I didn't dare tell my husband because I didn't know how to handle it, and I was afraid that if I spoke out, things would go too far and our marriage would be beyond saving. I chose to remain silent, trying to suppress the pain and fear inside me, pretending that nothing had happened. After the first time, things were never the same. I tried to live my normal life, carry on as if nothing was unusual, but every time I faced my father-in-law, I couldn't shake the feeling of trembling with fear. The way he looked at me had changed. It was no longer the indifferent, calm look he had before. Every time I met that look, I could feel something, a possessiveness, a desire that I had never seen before. That look confused me, panicked me, but also pulled me into a spiral of guilt and torment that I couldn't escape. Another night, not long after that first time, my husband was working late at his job, and my mother-in-law was at yoga as usual. I stayed home feeling uneasy. The fear of facing my father-in-law always haunted me when we were alone at home. When he entered the house that night, I knew the worst was about to happen again. There was no averting of the eyes or restraint like before. This time he walked right up to me, and before I knew what was happening, he was pulling me into the room. Everything happened so fast that I had no time to react or resist. The door closed behind us. In the small room, I could feel his heavy breathing right next to my ear. This time it was much stronger. My weak resistance only made him more determined. I tried to push him away, but that only brought him closer, forcing me to accept the fact that I could not escape this situation. Even at that terrible time, his mastery shocked me. My father-in-law, even at 52, had a strength and ability in bed that I had never seen in my husband. My husband, despite his great appearance, was always weak and hasty in intimacy, which gradually made me feel disappointed and distant. My father-in-law, on the other hand, knew exactly what he had to do. Every action, every gesture was full of control and power. I didn't want to admit it, but deep down I felt something I had never felt with my husband. Pleasure mixed with guilt, fear combined with shame. I didn't know what to do. All I knew was that I had been drawn into something I couldn't get out of. When it was all over, I sat down, my heart heavy. But he acted as if nothing had happened, as if it was a given, a part of life that I had to accept. After that, my father-in-law and I became even more secretive. Whenever my husband was away from home or my mother-in-law was busy, it became an opportunity for him to approach me. Every time I saw him, I could feel the tension in the air, but there was also something that drew me to him despite all my reason and resistance. It was a complex feeling, a mixture of hatred and repressed desire that I could not resist, could not break away from. The sinful relationship continued. We both knew that what we were doing was wrong, but neither of us seemed to be able to stop. I found myself sinking deeper into this relationship, trapped between guilt and emotions I could not control. About a year later, I gave birth to a baby boy, the child my husband's family had been waiting for as a release from the pressure that had been building all this time. For everyone, it was happiness, a sign that the family was complete. But for me, it was an obsession, the result of a terrible secret that I had to bear alone. I looked at my son with both love and pain, wondering if he knew anything about the circumstances of his birth. In those moments when I held him in my arms, I clearly felt the heaviness in my heart. After our child was born, my husband and I moved out. Having a child gave my husband some joy and peace of mind, but I knew there was an invisible wall between us. The closeness we once had was completely gone. Every time I looked into my husband's eyes, I felt like I was hiding something unforgivable. My conscience was always tormenting me, a feeling of guilt that clung to me every day. I couldn't tell him the truth. I knew that if I confessed, everything would fall apart. Our life, our family, our child, everything would collapse. I didn't have the courage to face that consequence. Instead, I chose to keep it all inside, to keep the pain inside, and to live in a suffocating silence. Every day I had to pretend that everything was fine and that I didn't have a terrible secret. But deep down, I always felt the rift between us. Even though he doesn't know it, I still feel guilty toward my husband. I feel like I've betrayed him, not only physically, but also emotionally. But I don't know how to get out of this spiral. The truth is too painful to speak, and the silence consumes me day by day. I stand here with the pain in my heart, and I don't know what to do next. My son, my husband, my family, everything seems so fragile, as if just one confession from me would shatter everything. But I can't carry this guilt forever. I wonder if I should tell my husband the truth about my secret relationship with my father-in-law and the real cause of my daily guilt. If I do, will he forgive me? Our lives would probably never be the same, and I would probably lose everything. Or should I keep quiet and bury this secret forever if it means keeping my family and children safe? I can endure the suffering, but the silence is killing me and preventing me from escaping the pain and humiliation. What would you do if you were me? Should I keep silent to protect my family or confess to free myself? I really don't know what to do. I need people who understand this feeling to help me and give me advice.